Well, thank you to the Dead of Winter ASL Scenario T6 video introduction. This is your host ID Jester, and as I mentioned in our previous video where I asked for your help in creating some scenario setups, this is going to be an introductory to all the special rules associated with the Scenario T6, the Dead of Winter. One of the reasons I chose this scenario is because it has a few of the rules that you're not going to be using a lot. Hopefully you've been following along the rules in my Know Your ASL video series that I've been doing. So hopefully you've been following that along, and we're going to cover some of the rules associated with the Dead of Winter scenario. So Dead of Winter is a December 1941 scenario between the Russians and the Germans. And it takes place at map board number 4, but it's only halfway. Only half of the board is being used. Row R over to GG1, so only this half of the map board is being used. The Germans are going to set up first, anywhere, I believe. Yes, set up at map board 4. So the Germans are going to set up first, anywhere on map board 4. The Russians will then come in off of this edge over here. So they're going to set up anywhere from Q over to the right-hand side. So the victory conditions here is the Russian player wins immediately by exiting greater than or equal to 20 victory points, excluding prisoners, off the south edge on or between hexes AA1 and GG1. Excuse me. So if you look at our map board here, Russians between AA1, between or including AA1 to GG1. So anywhere in the bottom left-hand corner here, they need to exit 20 or more victory points off of that location, off of those hexes, and they win this scenario. If they don't, then the Germans win this scenario. So pretty simple there. It is excluding prisoners, so if you take prisoners, if the Russians take prisoners, they don't get victory points. They only get victory points for themselves, which makes me almost think the Russians player, in this case me, is probably not going to use prisoners because there's really no benefit in trying to capture prisoners. So we will probably have to look at that. It's only 5.5 turns long, so it's not a very long scenario, and there isn't too many in-depth units. The German player has 1 AFV and 1 anti-tank weapon, 6 trenches, a few squads, a crew, a couple leaders, medium machine gun, light machine gun, and a DC. The Russian player, on the other hand, has 6 squads, 2 leaders, and 3 tanks. Some of the special rules we need to look at are listed down here. Environmental conditions are snow, with deep snow and no wind. And we have extreme winter is in effect. The German AFV is dug in, and the Russians have winter camouflaging. So we need to look at all these special rules associated with some of the things in the scenario, and also some of the special rules. So if we go up to our Dead of Winter ASL Scenario T6 rules overview, one of the first things we notice is there's deep snow. When deep snow is in effect, winter camouflage comes into effect, fire rules come into effect, and terrain rules come into effect. In addition, deep snow also transforms all brush into open ground. In this case, we're just playing this half of the map board. We can see there's woods, a few wood buildings, there's 1 stone building. The orchards here is obviously not in the season because it's December. We have some unpaved roads. We have, looks like some hedges here. So there is no brush. We don't have to worry. There's 1 shell hole hex here. So we don't have to worry about brush. So we don't have to worry about that specific rule. One of the things we do have to worry about is HE attacks because it is, deep snow. All HE attacks in open ground must add a +1 TEM, which is cumulative with other TEM. due to the concussion effects of deep snow. So +1 on all our TEMs when we use HE. And this is, of course, not HE equivalency. The residual firepowers of such attacks are also going to be reduced by 1 IFT column, and FFMO still applies. Movement, when we're talking about movement in deep snow, infantry and cavalry movement, deep snow, the penalty is basically going to be infantry and cavalry movement penalties still apply. In addition, all units must pay an extra half movement factor per hex side they cross. The road bonus for movement is applicable only along plowed roads. We don't have plowed roads because there's no special scenario rule that says that they are plowed, so we can assume they aren't plowed. And gallop isn't only for horses. So basically, for infantry, it's going to cost them an extra half movement factor per hex side. Vehicle movement in deep snow, minimum road entry cost is 1 movement point, not a half a movement point, whether they're buttoned up or not. So it's going to be 1 movement point along a road, whether they want to or not. So you might as well keep your guys buttoned up. Again, except along plowed roads, and we don't have any of these, all tracked vehicles must pay 1 extra movement point, and all non-tracked vehicles must pay 2. So what we're concerned about is tracked vehicles must pay an extra 1. So it's going to take, basically, because of the deep snow, it's going to cost infantry 1.5, 3, 4.5 to move 3 spaces. So obviously that's not going to work unless, of course, they're CXing or moving with the leader or whatever. So movement's going to be slow going. Vehicles is going to cost at least 1 point to go along the road, and it's 1 point extra per hex side cross. So it's going to cost, assuming this guy was facing the right way here, assuming he was facing the right way, it's going to cost him 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 to go there. He only has 17 movement points. So you can see again, very slow movement because of the deep snow. So something to keep in mind when we're thinking about scenario setups for these units. Winter Camouflage. Winter Camouflage is going to give a bonus here, section 3.712. All infantry unit vehicles specified as having Winter Camouflage receive a +1 hindrance die roll modifier when fired upon beyond 8 hexes if they're infantry, or 16 hexes otherwise, unless they already qualify for positive TEM other than smoke. All units receive a -1 die roll modifier to their concealment, and they may assault, move, and advance in open ground hexes regardless of range to enemy units without losing concealment. That could be huge for the Russians, since the Russians have winter camouflage. They can assault, move, and advance without losing concealment in open ground hexes. So they're not restricted infantry-wise, coming down maybe through these woods and this buildings hexes here. If they can get concealment other ways, they could possibly assault, move, and move around from the top and keep their concealment, etc., etc. So that could be interesting how that plays out. Fires, there's some rules in fires. Basically, we're not going to have to worry too much about fires because of the deep snow. The terrain bonuses here. Deep snow turns all marsh and mud flats to open ground. We don't care about that. There is a +2 die roll modifier for entrenching. Extreme weather. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is section 3.741, the break number and X number of all ordinances is going to decrease by the following amounts. Pre-April 1941, the Russians have a 1 penalty. So pre-April 1941. Now this is December 19. Oops. Let's look at our scenario card here. It's December 1941. So this rule isn't going to apply to the pre-April 1941 Russians. So that's not going to apply because it's December 1941. But this rule is going to apply. Pre-April 1942 Axis are 2. So their break number and X number of all their ordinances and special weapons is going to be decreased by 2 points for this scenario, just because of their malfunctioning and breaking because of this extreme cold and not being prepared for it, I'm assuming. The other thing that comes into play here is going to be section 3.742, which is going to be fate. So basically, any non-Finnish Axis personnel unit until April 1942 or Russian prior to April 41 that makes an original rally die roll greater than or equal to 11 while not in a building or pillbox suffers a casualty reduction. So again, another important rule that comes into effect. Original rally die roll, and it's just going to affect the Germans in this case. Again, the Russians don't have to worry about this because it's December 1941. The Germans are going to have to worry about this because it is before April 1942. Foxholes can't be dug during extreme weather, which comes into play because all of our trenches, the rules for trenches apply to foxholes except for what's the rule changes, which we're going to cover here in a minute. Axis vehicles in extreme weather prior to April 1942. Axis scenario defenders, much in each motorized vehicle he sets up on board or not in motion, make a die roll before the vehicle expends its first movement point of the scenario, and on a 6 it's immobilized. So in this case, probably not going to be moving our vehicle around much anyways, because it is it is dug in, which we're going to talk about here. So dug in AFV is treated as an armored cupola, except for as stated otherwise. Cupola? I'm not sure how to say that. A dug in AFV is HD to all direct fire attacks, has a +1 target size modifier, and does not create a hindrance. A dug in AFV has a vehicle crew, can be crew exposed, does have a crew survival number, and will leave a scroungeable burnable wreck, which does not leave a wreck hindrance. Place a vehicle crest counter on the AFV to show its dug in status. So so basically it's just dug in. It's going to be HD, hauled down to any direct fire attack. So the only attack that's going to affect it, obviously, is a turret hit. And here's the rules on the armored cupola. Not too involved there. Talk about some of the placement, the size and stuff. Trenches, we do have to worry about trenches because the German player has 6 trenches that they're going to be able to set up. Trench counters. So all the rules that apply with foxholes apply to trenches, except for modified here. Trench can never hold more than 3 squads or 4 single-man counters. Any counter starts the scenario beneath the trench counter, but 5/8 counters cannot be removed from the trench during play except for DM orders. Any vehicle beneath the trench counter is considered HD, but may not change its vehicle covering arc or expend its start movement point. The beneficial TEM of a trench applies even if enemy units are in adjacent or connecting trenches. That's kind of an important one here. The TEM of a trench applies even if enemy units are in adjacent connecting trenches. Basically, movement between the trenches is easier because it's, just a big long trench and you can run along the trench. So trench counters are automatically connected to any other trench counter, not separated by a cliff or water obstacle. Infantry already beneath the trench counter may move to connecting trench without paying the extra movement factor to enter or exit the trench, which would normally apply. Infantry moving from one connecting trench to another are never subject to FFNAM, FFMO die roll modifiers, snapshots, interdiction, or minefield attacks. The cost to enter a connecting trench is always one movement factor unless you're going up to a higher elevation. Even wire, walls, hedges have no effect on movement between trenches, and units may use non-assault movement between connecting trenches without losing their concealment. So another good bonus for the German player, that he can move his units around in the trenches without, he can use non-assault movement and not lose his concealment. Vehicles and half-tracks may not enter a trench hex. Fully tracked vehicles which enter a trench hex at the cost of the train the other train in the hex, but are not considered beneath the trench and must change a bog die roll when entering or changing vehicle covering arc. And here's kind of a breakdown of our three main units, other than our infantry that we have. We have our German vehicle here, which is going to be HD, so there's going to be no hull hits. So he's got a front side turret of 4 armor and rear and side turret of 3. And his 2 kill number is a 10. And front hull for this guy is 11. Front turret is 8. Side rear is 6. Side rear turret is 6. Its 2 kill number is a 12. Base numbers, obviously, and our 18-37 millimeter AT gun is a 2 kill number of 9. So that's kind of a breakdown of some of the special rules we're going to have to deal with. The extreme snow and what it does, the winter camouflaging, the dug-in AFV, and also the trenches, and how all of that is going to come into play during this scenario. Some of the other things we have to think about when we're looking at this scenario, as the Russian player, you notice our AFVs here have a red movement factor, movement point number. Sorry. So the anytime it spends a movement point to start, it has to do a mechanical reliability check to see if it actually breaks down or if it starts up okay. So the German player, one of the things they're going to have to think about is whether or not they want to stop and start these vehicles during the scenario, because every time they start up, there's a chance they might not get to move anymore. They might be broken down, which is kind of important, because if we go back to our victory points here, the Russian player needs to exit 20 or more victory points, excluding prisoners, off the south edge. So that's kind of important in that. Oops, keep going. There we go. The Russian player has each one of these tanks is worth 1 victory point plus 1 if its main armament is functioning and not broken. So that would be a second movement point. And then they get a victory point for each armor factors divided by 5. Fractions round up. So in this case, its highest armor factor for any of its side is 11. 5 goes into 11. 2 points something times, so that 2 gets rounded up to 3 points. So they would get 3 victory points based on their armor factors. They would get 1 if their main armament is functioning and working, and then they would get 1 for the actual counter. So each one of these tanks is basically worth 5 victory points. Each full squad is worth 2 victory points. So if you look at how many victory points the Russian player actually has here, if we're looking at scenario overview, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 in squads, 15 in vehicles. Each leader is worth 1 plus an additional 1 for every negative multiplier. So in this case, he's got a -8 -1. So he's actually worth 2 victory points. This guy is only worth 1 victory point. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. So he has 15 in vehicles, and he has 15 in squads. So he has a total of 30 victory points that he needs to get 20 or more off of this edge over here. So if the German players can somehow destroy 2 vehicles, then he has to get everything else off the board to win this scenario, just to get his 20 victory points, assuming he doesn't get any extra leaders or anything like that through in this scenario. So the German player only has to, if he can kill off a few of the squads and maybe a tank, he only has to kill off basically 11 victory points worth of stuff. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Let's do it this way. 2, 4. If he was to get lucky shot on a tank, that's 5. That's 9, 10, 11. So if he could just kill 1 tank, 8, 1, -1, and 2 squads, that's 11 victory points. The Russian player's not going to have enough to win. So the German player just has to get a little bit of damage for his side. So the Russian player has to be kind of careful what he's doing with his units, because everyone is like gold to him as opposed to the German player. The German player, on the other hand, has a couple, if we look back at our little sheet here, you can see if we got a 2-kill number of 10, the only chance we have of doing anything is hitting the side or rear of this vehicle. And even if he does, he's probably going to be having to roll a 2, 3, or 4. So chances of doing things against these vehicles pretty slim. This guy can't set up hidden, so he's going to know where this unit's at. And this guy has got crap for armor. You can see that. So it's going to be, a 2-kill number of 12. And even if he hits for a 4, that's still 8 or less on 2 6-sided dice for a kill on that. Now the problem with the Russians securing a hit on the vehicle here is that since it's hull down, he can only hit turrets. So half of his hits are going to be nullified just by having the colored dice be greater than the white dice. That would be a hull hit. If the colored dice is less than the white dice, then it'd be a turret hit. So half of his hits are going to hit the turret, which are half of his attacks are going to hit the hull, and basically are no hits. So he does have 3 of these vehicles. The other thing we have to keep in mind is this guy here. He only has the 2-kill number 9. Again, pretty slim chance. And even if he's hitting them in the side or the hull, he does have a 3 rate of fire. So if he can get a position where he's behind these guys and can hit them in the side or the hull, and he takes enough shots, possibly he can get a kill out of that, or maybe an immobilization is just as well as a kill, because if these guys are immobilized, he can't get them off of this map edge to get the victory point. So immobilization is just as good for either the AFV or the AT gun. The AT gun can set up hidden somewhere, although there's not a lot of great areas to actually set up. There's not a lot of coverage. There's a few different areas, so the Russian player again has to be careful with all of his units, and is going to have to decide where to bring his units in and think about um, where he's going to take his units. When he's doing this, the other thing is, like I said, it's only 5.5 turns long. So if, because of the deep snow, it's going to take him twice as long to get anywhere because of the extra +1 per hex side to enter because of the deep snow. He gets no road bonuses, so coming down the road doesn't give him any kind of a bonus there whatsoever. Sniper numbers. If you look at the sniper numbers, Russians only got a sniper 2, so very, very low. Germans have a sniper number 3. You know, that's not much better. The German players does have trenches that he can put out and put his units in trenches, so he doesn't have to worry so much about vehicle overruns because it's going to be a +4 against vehicle overruns. All other attacks are going to be +2, so he does have some covering because of the trenches. So setup of the trenches is going to be crucial, I think, in deciding what he's going to do with his units for the German player. And having the trenches, it's going to give him quite an idea. Since he sets up first, he's not sure what the Russian's going to do. Because it is 29th of December 1941, the rules for riders on AFVs do not apply yet. You can only get AFV riders in 1942 if you're Russian. So if this battle would have taken place a couple days later, then they might have been able to put riders on their vehicles, but in this case that's not going to happen, so the infantry is going to have to hoof it themselves. So having infantry start way up here, 5 turns, they're only going to be able to move a couple hexes each turn, unless they're with the leader, and even if they're with the leader, they're only going to move 3 spaces. Let's see, it's going to cost or let's see, wait a minute. Yeah, it was a half a movement point. So 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. So yeah, basically 4 spaces if they're with a leader, 2 spaces if they're not with a leader, and then of course if they CX, possibly maybe another spot. So having infantry come way up here and circling around to come around is probably not going to happen. The Russian player is going to have to force his units down here to the bottom. The German player is going to know this, so he's going to be prepared down here in the bottom for a Russian onslaught. So then he has to decide what the vehicles are going to do, if the vehicles are going to come down here to support the infantry, or if the vehicles are going to do something different. They also have to worry about stopping and starting, and the other thing they have to worry about if we show info on the vehicles is they have no radios. So these guys are going to have to platoon move as vehicles. So these 3 guys here will all have to platoon move together since they have no radios. So yeah, a lot of different things we have to think about when we're actually going to be participating in this scenario. Let's see if there's anything else that we have to. As the Russian player, we do get the bonuses for not having to worry about the break numbers. German player, we do have a medium machine gun and a light machine gun. Although these guys, if we use them a lot, sooner or later we're going to break them. Which could be bad, or destroy them altogether. So that could be really, really bad. Yeah, could be pretty bad. We don't have a lot of forces to try and keep the units out of this area either, so I think it's going to be pretty interesting scenario. And like I mentioned in my previous video, I am looking for you to send me some setups for the German players and for the Russian players. If your setup is chosen, hopefully I get some setups. Send me a message on my YouTube channel or get in touch with me, and I will get with you an email, and you can send me your vassal setup and some information about your setup, and I will of course give you full credit for your awesomeness. So yeah, there we go. So that's kind of an overview of the rules associated with the dead of winter, and kind of an overview on some of the things we have to think about for the scenario, and what we're going to do or not going to do uh, for this scenario with the different units. So please, again, if you are interested in watching this video series, you do have time here. We're not going to start it here for another week or so. If you do have time, be sure to send in your scenario setup for me, and hopefully I'll be able to use it for our scenario, and that way it'll help me out instead of having me worry about making sure that I'm um, you know, playing it as fair and as impartial as I can. And if I know the German AT gun is hidden there, it's hidden in place in this wood hex, it's hard for me to just drive a Russian vehicle right up there knowing that this guy is actually there. So I'm hoping that I get two different setups that I can work with without having to worry about uh, the situation of having issue where I have to play both sides impartially, but I also know that this is there, but the Russian player doesn't know it's there. So what would he do? Would he drive a tank, down the middle here, or would he come around up the top? So anyways, please do send me your scenario setups, and thanks a lot for watching this. This is going to be another interesting part of ASL, and hopefully learn a few things along the way. Hopefully learn a bunch of these different special rules. The deep snow definitely going to come into effect. The extreme weather is going to come into effect. The poor Germans, anytime they fail a rally check by rolling 11 or higher, they're going to casualty reduce if they're not in a building or a bunker. German is hauled down with his AFV, hidden, not hidden, I guess it's not hidden, but it's going to be hauled down. So hopefully he can survive some of the Russian attacks. He does get to hide his AT gun somewhere. He does have a nice medium machine gun, which can seriously do some damage. So it's got a 2 rate of fire on that thing. And assuming he doesn't break it in the first die roll, like we always tend to do when we have some rule that's working against us, the first time we use that unit, it seems like we always get it destroyed and that rule comes into play. But hopefully for the German player, we don't have to worry about that. And we also, as a German player, know that the deep snow is going to keep these guys from moving around too fast. But the Russian player, on the other hand, has the winter camouflage, and the HE attacks against units in open ground gets a +1. So he doesn't. Even his units moving out in the open are going to get a bonus for the deep snow. What do they call that? Yeah, concussion effects of deep snow. Concussioning effects of deep snow. Couldn't think of the word there. So yeah, he's going to get that bonus. Plus, the Russian player also knows that he can assault, move, and advance into open ground, regardless of range, without losing their concealment. So if he can get some concealment on the German player, he can advance into open ground and not lose that, and put the pressure back on the German player. So a lot of interesting rules. And I like to look at these rules ahead of time because I think these rules are going to change how the scenario is going to be played once you analyze and decide, look at some of the rules, and you might have already had a strategy in mind, but once you look at the rules, you go, oh, that's not going to work because of this rule, and oh, that's going to be better because of this rule. So I definitely like looking at the rules that correspond with all of the special rules that are associated with that scenario. And then once I look at those rules, I also like to look at our actual units and find out how what the advantages and disadvantages of these units are. These guys don't have these tanks don't have uh, radios. They have mechanical reliability problems, uh, but they do have awesome armor that, as long as front wise, they have really awesome side and rear hull. Not too bad compared with what a 10 kill and a 9 kill, and they're going up against 6 armor, so still pretty reasonable against the firepower of the Germans. So unless the German player gets really lucky, I think the AFVs can really cause some serious problems for the German player. Um, so yeah, we'll look at this scenario. Send me your setups, and we'll get it started here beginning of February. And hope everyone stays on board and enjoys this. And if you have any thoughts or comments, suggestions before we get started, it's the time to do it. And we'll see you then.